Last time on Low Budget Binge.
After a night of partying hard for a bachelorette party in Eastern Europe, there might be a bit of harsh language and some gore here and there. Most of that takes place within about a 5-minute montage. Meanwhile, the bodies are beginning to stack higher and higher. But the imagery itself looks to be animated into the frame in a very rudimentary way. Needless to say, this isn't your typical slasher.
And now, the next death-defying chapter of Low Budget Binge.
Welcome back to ML Miller Frights, a part of the Kings of Horror Network. I'm ML Miller. While you might be watching this video on the Kings of Horror Network, I urge you to click over to my ML Miller Frights page and give it a like, share with your buddies across the electronic superhighway, click subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to ring that bell for notifications. Please get the word out so that new folks can check out ML Miller Frights as well as the Kings of Horror Network and make these channels bigger and better. If you're in the Chicago area and love horror, you have no excuse not to head out to the Chi-Town Movies Drive-In for the Music Box of Horrors at the Drive-In. Every day in October for 31 nights of horror, there will be late shows, Sunday through Thursday, and double features every Friday and Saturday night. Every weekend is themed, Grindhouse Fridays, Rip-Off Saturdays, and Sequel Sundays. Tonight they're playing Attack the Block, which is an amazing film I haven't seen in a while, and I can't wait to see it again, starring a very young John Boyega. Look below for a link to the schedule, where to get tickets, and directions to this awesome horror event. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see in the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review and down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. First up is the Tokyo Homestay Massacre. It's new on-demand and DVD Blu-ray from Culture Shock Japan. There's something about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre ripoffs that I really find endearing. Depending on the amount of creativity behind the project, you can always get a cool assortment of characters and a backwoods family, and a good amount of grueling torment and gore. Even the most voracious TCM fan would have a tough time digesting this do-it-yourself, no-budgeter Tokyo Homestay Massacre. A trio of kids arrive in Japan and hope to soak in the sights and culture. These are well-intentioned kids and have no clue that the room they're about to rent is in a house occupied by a horrifying family with a hunger for flesh and blood. The thing that stands out almost immediately is that the 3 American actors in the leads are absolutely god-awful. Everything from the quiet moments that are supposed to be dramatic to the frantic moments that are supposed to be horrifying end up being laughably bad because these 3 simply couldn't toss out a line with some effectiveness to save their lives. This will be a deal breaker for those unable to see past the terrible leads. That said, there is a level of depravity that is somewhat admirable here. The crazy Japanese family does have their moments, with one tormented boy continually smashing a baby doll against a rock, and another little girl with a staring problem. I also thought the big fight with a pair of twin police officers and one of the victims was gory, goofy fun. Still, even from a rudimentary story level, Tokyo Homestay Massacre doesn't work. Really, the only sin the kids commit is that they're bad actors. Unlike the obnoxious and annoying characters in most of these TCM films, they're relative innocents and not even given a chance to prove that they're bad tourists, which means watching them receive a good torturing isn't cathartic or anything, it's just kind of sad. This is a laughably bad movie, and if you're a fan of that type of film, you'll have a buffet to feast on with Tokyo Homestay Massacre. The Call is new in select theaters and drive-ins from Cinedigm. It's directed by Timothy Woodward Jr. An elderly woman named Edith Cranston, Insidious's Lynn Shay, is tormented by a group of teens who believe her to be a witch. A new kid in town with a troubled past named Chris, played by Chester Rushing, mixes up with this group of no-good kids and goes with the group for another night of Edith's torment. When Edith confronts them in her yard, she's driven to suicide by the mean-spirited taunts and pranks she has endured from the kids all through the years. The next week, Edith's husband, Edward, Saw's Tobin Bell, invites the group to their home, as it appears Edith has left the kids something in her will. Edward proposes a game to the group. If they can stay on the phone upstairs for 1 minute, they'll get $100,000. Edward seems to have buried Edith with a telephone, and the phone upstairs is a direct line to beyond the grave. Will any of the kids have what it takes to survive Edith's collect call for revenge? Swiping some elements from a particularly blood-curdling episode of The Twilight Zone, The Call has its intentions in the right place. It's got big operatic and spooky music, a nice atmosphere with Edith's home decorated with all sorts of gothic statues and antiques, and a hook that basically makes the film a fantasy slasher where the childhood fears of the kids are used against them as revenge. While this is not unlike the way Freddy Krueger offs his prey in a Nightmare on Elm Street series, and Shay should know because she's related to Bob Shay and also had a role in the original Elm Street, these are somewhat standard paranormal slasher tropes that are tried and true, but done with some skill in The Call. It may not be entirely original, but the motions the film goes through are decently made. It's frustrating when actors in their twilight years give up the ghost to play characters and simply end up playing themselves in a film over and over. Actors like Jack Nicholson, Al Pacino, and Robert De Niro have unfortunately fallen from historic heights in the industry to simply showing up, muttering a few lines that resemble most of their previous performances, and then take off to cash in their check to pay for that summer home. While I respect Lynn Shay for all of the work she has done in the horror industry, I feel she and her co-star Tobin Bell have sadly fallen in that category of simply showing up and being Lynn and Tobin. What I'd give to see these actors play a character rather than the same role we've seen a million times. In The Call, Bell is most guilty of this. He even invites the group to play a game in the exact same gravelly voice he uses in every Saw film. Shay gets to stretch her acting muscles a bit more as the big bad here, acting as her own supernatural slasher with cackling glee. But still, it's nothing we really haven't seen before. The Call has its moments of charm and effectiveness, the kids aren't terrible actors, and it's set in the 80s without being guilty of being obvious about it. There's a nice retro feel to this horror, as if it might have played well had it been released in the year it was trying to portray. Still, there's nothing new to see here, but if you're looking for a harmless throwback, answer The Call. Luz was the name of my dog when I was a kid, and it's also the name of this new movie that's new on-demand and digital download from Dark Sky Films. Not to be mistaken with the excellent experimental film Luz, released last year, Luz, the Flower of Evil, is a resonant tale of religious fanaticism set against the gorgeous backdrop of the Colombia countryside. El Señor, Conrado Osorio, is the spiritual leader of a group of Colombian peasants living off the land and giving thanks to God for what little they have. El Señor preaches his own version of the gospel, which has many, many rules, and keeps the entire group in line. His 3 daughters, Leila, Andrea Esquivel, Uma, Yuri Vargas, and Zion, Sharon Guzman, are looked at as angels and worshipped by the camp. The girls, blossoming into womanhood, are of course curious about the world outside of the little group, and full of questions that El Señor deems blasphemous. When a woman and her child wander into the village, El Señor gets rid of the woman and dubs the child Jesus, the Son of God, played by Johan Camacho. El Señor chains the boy to the stable and says that Jesus' presence will bless their group. But the boy seems to bring nothing but evil to the land and to El Señor's flock. Luz, the Flower of Evil, centers on the perversion of religion and how that can be devastating to those following that religion, especially those who are young and impressionable. The 3 daughters are devoted to El Señor's preachings, believe their actions have effects on their fate and fortune, and harbor extreme guilt over simply having thoughts that are natural for girls their age reaching puberty. El Señor's overly protective paternal nature over his daughters, of course, become a factor in his preachings, filling them with fear and guilt. This makes for an extremely stressful watch, as the girls are curious about boys and the world beyond their small borders, questioning everything El Señor mandates, and ending up either being punished for their curiosity or racked with guilt for natural feelings. This is the main conflict in the film, and it takes on a myriad of forms as each daughter perceives the preachings, the guilt, and their own curiosity in their own way. The result is a rich portrait of religion's destructive burden on the natural ways of life. These heavy themes are supported by powerful performances. These characters look and act as if they're truly living in this poverty level lifestyle. Each of the daughters shine in their own way. We get to see Layla, Esquivel, soar while listening to music from the outside world on a tape player she finds in the forest. We see Uma, Vargas, flutter as she flirts with a local boy. And we see Zion, Guzman, fearlessly approach anything she doesn't understand head-on despite her young age and small frame. Trying to wrangle these three precocious young women is the overpowering and somewhat understandably burdened El Señor. He's not a villain with evil intent, though there are based instincts, feelings, and urges he gives into that are less than holy. He's hampered by the responsibility not only to lead his followers, but also with the fear of the world and what it can do to his innocent girls. His villainy comes from his love of his daughters, and that's what makes Osorio's character of El Señor so fascinating. In many ways, Luz, the Flower of Evil, is a retelling of the same themes of fear, curiosity, paranoia, and perversion that were prevalent in The Witch. Like that film, it's mainly set in a simpler time, focusing on a blossoming female character and how that metamorphosis threatens the orderly comfort of the strict religious culture in one family. As much as The Witch is an art house film, Luz, Flower of Evil is more so, as it is a patient, often silent film that focuses on soaking in the lush landscape, the bare scratchings the culture of El Señor's followers make on the land, and the vastness of the dark night sky. It's not a mainstream film, and those who are looking for one should seek elsewhere for entertainment, but the wondrous performances, tragic themes, and gorgeous look of filmmakers Juan Diego and Escobar Alzate make for a treat for those with an appetite for meatier themes, horrifying actions, and dangerously tempting sights. The Dead Ones is new on Blu-ray from Artsploitation Films. It's directed by Jeremy Kasten. If you've done your horror movie homework, I think you're bound to guess the twist of The Dead Ones within the first 5 to 10 minutes of the film. But while the film follows a well-worn trope in horror, it peppers through interesting, fun, and downright haunting things to make it worth the trip. A quartet of teenagers are brought to their school that recently was the site of a school shooting. The group is there for detention of some kind, and it's their job to clean up things and get the school ready to reopen. Meanwhile, a group of kids don gas masks and plan a siege on the school right outside. That's pretty much all I'm going to tell you about The Dead Ones in regards to story. Anymore, I'm sure you'll guess what's going on, and it's this predictability that really distracted me from the story for about the first 20 minutes. Still, I stuck with The Dead Ones, and I'm glad I did. Though the plot is familiar, I found the screenplay to be actually pretty great. There's a fantastically haunting monologue, one of the students named Mouse, played by Sarah Rose Harper, that is extremely well written and realized, giving some haunting backstory into her character. I also like the way these school kids are presented as your typical Breakfast Club cast, with the jock, the reject, the outcast, the cheerleader, and so on. But once you get to know them, there's a lot of hidden depth and unconventional character there. Writer Zach Chassler did a great job of making this unconventional story unique with the details, and that really made the whole experience work for me. Director Jeremy Kasten also produced some extremely unsettling scenes. The flashbacks to the school shooting are extremely rough to watch, given the sheer amount of shootings that littered the news over the last few years. Seeing these masked kids in trench coats mowing down the students is definitely disturbing, and it's presented in a very non-glamorous way. But as the story proceeds, things get a little trippy, mainly because the mental states of these kids are fracturing, and the demonic hallucinations are nightmarish indeed. I especially loved one of the demons who eats bloody bandages that are littered in the bathroom. So gross, but so wickedly awesome. A lot of the effects are practical and well done, aided by some CG enhancements, but when The Dead Ones goes full CG, there are definitely some issues. Some of the things that never works is the CG blood burst, and it's utilized numerous times here. Low-budget blood splatter effects just don't look right. And if I could give advice to every new filmmaker, I'd say to steer clear from CG blood bursts and just go for the practical squib burst for a much better effect. Though I knew where The Dead Ones was going to end up, some interesting acting, a solid script, and terrifyingly original monster and gore sequences kept things interesting enough for me to recommend this one. Don't tune out of this one once you've figured out the twist. Sitting through it for the thrills is worth it. Finally, we have Brea Grant's 12-Hour Shift. Grant directed and wrote this one, and she's best known for significant roles in Beyond the Gates, Dexter, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, and as the plucky speedster in Heroes. 12-Hour Shift is new in select theaters and on demand from Magnet Releasing. May's Angela Bettis plays Mandy, a beleaguered nurse, addicted to multiple drugs and willing to bend and break the rules in order to support her habit. Mandy's been working with her cousin Nicholas, played by Mick Foley, swapping him organs for the recently deceased for big money. Mandy's other cousin, Regina, the very Samara Weaving-esque Chloe Farnworth, has joined in on the scam and is acting as the middleman transporting the organs from the hospital to Nicholas's warehouse. The swap occurs at the beginning of Mandy's 12-hour shift, but the drop-off doesn't go so well, and thus a pitch-black comedy of errors begins, as Regina desperately tries to find a new kidney and relies on Mandy to help cover up for her mistakes. Meanwhile, a cop killer, played by David Arquette, is admitted to the hospital, throwing an even bigger crowbar into the mix as Mandy and Regina seem to have no compunctions against killing patients in order to get the organs they need. Grant keeps the pace quick, matching the manic Mandy as she self-medicates with whatever extra drugs she can get her hands on. The film pretty much balances itself on Bettis's slender but capable shoulders as a touchpoint to all of the different plot lines that are going on at once. The film offers up a large cast, all unique and fun, which makes it easier to follow. Grant's dialogue, as well as her rapid editing, makes it so there is never a dull moment all the way through. A ton of personality from the vibrant characters lead to some cool moments just put in there for fun, such as a Magnolia-esque song sung by multiple characters in different situations, and a fun out-of-the-blue dance number by an ambulance driver. The locale of the hospital, with its sterile walls and repetitive doors and hallways, are a great contrast to the absolute chaos of activity and multitude of story twists. It acts as a labyrinth in which you never know what kind of craziness is lingering around the corner to cause Mandy more problems. If you take anything away from 12-Hour Shift, it's that Angela Bettis is a marvelous actor. Anyone who saw May, or her role as the title character in the first Carrie remake, or in her role in The Woman, knows she can be a quirky performer. But here, she's given a broad range of miles to cover in terms of emotion and character. She's given a great arc that develops in a thoughtful way as she seems to come to grips with the reason she does so many drugs and may or may not do something about it after the credits roll. I hope we see much more of her in the future, as this is a role that people should take notice to. The other standout is Chloe Farnworth, who could have played her role as a one-note ditzy blonde, but instead put some nuance into her Regina, who is desperately trying to fix her own fuck-up, but only making matters worse at every turn. Hers is a much more physically exhaustive role, as there are a lot of gags that work well through simple looks and actions alone. 12-Hour Shift is pitch black in tone. While the whole thing is played for laughs, the dangers are real, and there is a solid sense that at any moment Mandy and Regina could be caught, murdered, or worse for their wrongdoings. You'll be laughing one minute and gasping the next at the unwavering onslaught of action, drama, gore, and undeniably funny situations. Director-writer Brea Grant handles comedy, horror, drama, and action with a skilled hand, juggling a multitude of dangerous plots and dastardly characters with ease, yet never forgetting to button it all down with real emotional heft. Brea Grant's 12-Hour Shift is a solid indie romp that shouldn't be missed. Whew, that's a whole lot of indies. That'll be it for today. If you like this video, please pound that thumbs up button. Share this video with your social media addicted pals. If you're looking for written reviews, as well as countdowns for the best in horror every day in October, you can check out mlmillerwrites.com. Don't forget I have 2 new horror comic book trade paperbacks you should look for. Grave Trancers is out right now, and Pirouette collecting never-before-published issues will be out in late November, early December, with Diamond Order Code APR 201712. And be sure to subscribe to this channel, and ring that bell for alerts to be the first to see my future videos. Thank you so much for your time, and take care.
No. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're